afternoon. We are here with another Ladies of Howard University person that I met in our group that was created restoratively through the visionary leadership of one of our Lady Bisons, who decided during our time that we needed to stay connected. And one of the groups that she was interested in being connected with was the Ladies of Howard. And I must tell you that I am so blessed by the opportunity and have made so many connections through beautiful, brilliant women that have empowered me, poured into me, prayed for me, you name it, they're doing it for me. And showed up on these interviews with me. And so I thank them. I want to introduce to you Dr. Charlie Brown, and I am fascinated by her work in mindful moments. I have seen her on her Facebook page doing mindful moments that I only can relate through the county, and how we generally have an emphasis on wellness and self-care. And so I was so impressed when I saw her presenting herself to help others that I had to bring her on and have an interview and learn more about her as a person, and hopefully have her share some of the insights and quick techniques that maybe could help you on a daily. And I know that this is something needed for all people. So I'm going to stop talking and please introduce yourself. Tell me a little bit about your background, as much as you want to share, career, background, interest, and how you earned your doctorate degree in such an exciting topic.
Yes, let's start with my doctorate and maybe work backwards from there. Thank you so much, Jeneen, for having me on. This is really a distinct honor and a great pleasure. I'm so glad to share in this interview space with you. So my doctorate is in integral and transpersonal psychology. Now, that is a mouthful for sure. Let me break that down for you a bit. Transpersonal means connecting mind, body, spirit, and environment, and integral means integrating. So this is a whole person psychology perspective that integrates the mind, body, spirit, and environment. This is different from traditional psychology, which generally asks, I'm oversimplifying, it generally asks kind of what's wrong with your head. Transpersonal psychology says, what experiences have you had that got you to this moment right here, right now? And all of those are present, whether you realize that or recognize that or not. And then the integral part, integrating all of that. How can we use all of these experiences we've had in our lives to show up fully in this moment at all times, at most times? We rarely do anything at all times.
That is so interesting. And just stopping you right there, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about trauma-informed practices in the school environment or in the family, if there are people going through counseling in your family. And by the way, people, it's Mental Health Awareness Month, May still. And I need you to know that there is nothing wrong with therapy. My best friend, one of them is a social worker. One of them, well, both of them in the social work field. Shout out to Ann Harlett and Nicolia Bagby, but we're Gooding now because she's married. Congratulations again. It's been years since the wedding. But anyway, there are times when I rely on their conversations therapeutically to help me navigate certain situations. And so please know, and my mother is a firm advocate of this too, that mental health therapy is essential. And you can speak to that if you want. But I love the idea of you connecting experiences with how we show up as a person, because that directly relates and is aligned to our work with social emotional learning, trauma-informed practices, and ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, right?
Yes, there are lots of overlaps between trauma-informed, specifically named trauma-informed, and transpersonal care. But it takes into account those experiences. I've been a longtime educator. I've worked in the education field in various formats for over 20 years. So understanding that the students that you have in front of you, the scholars that you have in front of you, they're bringing everything. They're, no, if I haven't eaten in 3 days, it's going to be very hard for me to concentrate in your classroom. And that may show up through all sorts of actions. That may show up with me increasingly trying to get your attention in what seem to be disruptive ways for a whole classroom. That may show up as me being asleep on the desk for most of your class because I might have 3 or 5 or 9 younger siblings or sibling-like characters. It might be actual siblings, it might be cousins. I also may be parenting my parents, whoever my caretakers are. So there are so many interactions and intersections between trauma-informed care and transpersonal care. And the note about therapy, I was very Black woman resistant. All the things you're thinking about when you think about therapy, I was all of those things. But as a psychologist, it is part of my coursework that I also have to go to therapy. Yeah. And it was the best decision of my adult Black woman life.
Wow, I love it. I love it. So, Mom, you're in my head. She's like, you should do therapy along with like a new marriage and all the new things and all the transitions in your life. I'm listening, Mom. I'm listening. Keep going.
I highly recommend it. And the relationship, the fit is really important. Yes. You need a therapist who, for whatever reason, you trust that they have your best interest at heart. Mm-hmm. You trust that they can offer you things that you can't see in a way that that is just different, but a way that you can take in, a way that you can accept. My therapist would, so I finally went to therapy because I literally couldn't hold it all anymore. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, if I have to pay somebody to listen to me, then so be it.
Yeah.
And she heard me. I felt seen and heard, which is important in a good therapist relationship. She would listen, offer me back tools. She was a somatic worker. Somatic means body. So our trauma also shows up in our body very consistently. Any aches and pains you may have, they come from an energetic level first. Energetic in this case could be trauma. It could be all sorts of things, but they show up in the energy field that is your body first before they show up in your body. And if we take, this is an aside, I'll get back to the therapy in a moment. If we take kind of what that looks like, what does that part of your body, what do you do with that part of your body? Your stomach, for instance, we digest things in our stomach. If you have stomach or digestion issues, I bet you also have a hard time in your outer world digesting things, taking in new information, breaking things down to a manageable part, something that is digestible. So all of that is related. So somatic worker, my therapist, and then she would offer me just kind of slight tweaks. She would ask me really good questions that made me take a completely different perspective. And often what that did was pull me out of victimhood. This thing happened to me. Instead, I was able to take my own responsibility for my part in this role. And that's not to say, so that can sound a lot like victim blaming, especially in a trauma-informed space. And so let me clarify that. I believe that we are active participants in our world. Now, we don't have control over outside things all the time. But sometimes what we need in that larger moment is the lesson that brings. Sometimes we can't see it right now. And then as we get into adulthood and get into careers and all of that and things that we do out in the world, we can see how that thing early on or that thing in my childhood, how difficult my childhood was, you can see how it serves as a point of motivation in later life. And understanding that these things happen within the context of what is allowed to happen in a society.
Wow. So yeah, it's manifesting in your life in different ways depending on your experiences.
Yes.
I had a Dr. Bruce on one of my earlier episodes. We talked a lot about PTSD and the impacts of it and how it was not related just to people in the military, but like it could walk, and that sounds very connected as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And if we studied people who had a similar adverse experience, it's traceable. Absolutely. The PTSD, the trauma of that, trauma shows up in very interesting ways in our bodies, and sometimes ways that don't seem to be connected at all to what we may be experiencing.
Wow. Well, I look forward to reading your dissertation maybe, and anything else that you have put out there. It seems very interesting, very appropriate for what we are going through in life as women or as people in general, and also for what we're going through right now, because I do consider what we're going through a crisis. Is there anything that you, or a traumatic experience where we're all grieving kind of? And so is there anything else about your growing up that you, in terms of like where you're from, your hometown and things like that you want to share with the audience before we get into our restorative questions? Because the questions are really designed to kind of take you through a reflection about this experience through this pandemic. But before we get there, is there anything else you want to share with the audience about kind of what you're doing in the right now, career-wise and motivational-wise, where you went to maybe high school or hometown or anything like that?
Sure. I'm from Philly, like you are. Hey.
Oh,
I went, right? I'm from North Philadelphia, so that is a notoriously rough part of town.
where'd you go to high school?
Masterman.
Okay, all right. Yeah, it makes sense. Masterman into Howard or girls.
It only makes sense to Philly people.
Right.
Philly people are like, "Where'd you go to high school?"
All the Philly people right now, just raise the roof a little.
Right. and GHS the same thing. Girls High, where you went, also, that carries some weight in the Philadelphia region.
Yeah.
So went to Masterman from 5th grade through 12th grade. It runs there. And Masterman is an academic magnet, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. And then from there went to Howard and studied business, very practical business, business management, and then changed that direction completely when I got to graduate school. I have a master's degree in women's spirituality, which is also a mouthful. My perspective on that is that women's spirituality is looking at women's traditions, women's spiritual traditions, including religion, throughout history, throughout the world, and finding my place on that very long, large continuum.
Excellent. Did you have to do a thesis to?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So my thesis, I wrote and performed a one-woman show with no theater background.
Are you kidding?
For my thesis.
Available for our subscribers to maybe go check out?
That's a good question. It's up. I think it's up somewhere. So maybe I'll find that link and send that to you. It was a number of years ago at this point.
That's excellent. All right. And so, yeah. So anything else that you want to share?
No, just longtime educator. Just, I am also a person who came out of circumstances and changed the narrative there. One really important thing that I've learned over maybe the arc of my career is just because something happened to you doesn't mean you have to lead with that part of your story. And you not leading with it doesn't make it untrue. So for a long time, up until about my early 20s, I would lead with this just really difficult part. And what I realized is yes, it's still true. And I didn't have to lead with it. I didn't have to keep replaying it in my own spirit. I could say, I'm adding on to this narrative. This narrative isn't the whole of who I am. This one thing, this one, piece of shame, or this one piece of poor judgment, or whatever it is for you, whatever the equivalent is in your life, it's okay. It's okay that this thing happened, and so many other things have happened as well that I can lead with. I don't have to lead with my trauma.
Absolutely. But we should be aware of it and how it could impact, but don't lead with it. I love it. Absolutely. So now we're going to transition into our restorative questions. If you are not familiar with restorative practices, it is something that I was trained through the International Institute of Restorative Practices to be a licensed trainer, to be able to deliver the 2-day training, one in an introduction to restorative practices, figuring out how you can build community and repair harm or restore relationships or manage conflict in a community when something goes wrong. We talk about proactively making sure you spend a lot of time doing things with all the stakeholders, whether that be students or staff or parents or anyone in your family, just doing things actively engaging in fun activities, maximize the positive, minimize the negative with people. And so just like if you were with a best friend or a spouse, you know, you would want to maximize the positive things that you do together. And hopefully you guys enjoy doing a lot of positive things together so that, you know, when you have those tough times, you can replay those moments when things were not so good to help you invest and stay committed into the charge. And so that's what I do. The other day 2 of my training is on circles and actually facilitating like small impromptu conferences. Like after a suspension in a school environment, maybe we would invite parents or any stakeholder who was actually impacted by the incident to be a part of kind of a restoration circle. And most importantly, with our circles, we use them to build community. And so our elementary schools, K-2, have implemented a social emotional curriculum and are implementing restorative practices or morning meetings in the form of a circle to check in with their students on how they're doing. One great example that is shared during our trainings is a video out of Baltimore after the Baltimore riots, and how the students were so charged and emotionally like focused on all that was going, and they used a strategic approach to calming them and providing a teachable moment. And so they did circles with all the classrooms, and they were able to allow a safe space for students first to say, what did you hear? What did you see? How did you feel? And then they allowed them to talk or be educated about how do we remain safe and what are the safe things we do at school, at home, and in our community. So it was a great teachable moment that took a traumatic incident that could have festered, if not directed appropriately, into a beautiful teachable moment. So that's what I do. So as you in your field, what are some things that you are thinking and feeling, or as just a person, as a woman, as the crisis continues to unfold? What are you thinking and feeling?
Well, I'm actually not calling it a crisis.
Okay, start there.
For me, I think that language is part of the energy of a thing. And so one of the first things I did was actually get off of social media for a couple of weeks. When everything first hit, I said, I don't need to be in this crisis energy, is what I said. And I said, people are going to feel like this is a crisis. I found that this is a really good opportunity to turn inward and be intentional about how we want to turn outward again as that time is approaching now. So a good friend of mine, he calls me a social empath. I'm not empathic in the sense that I will pick up an individual's kind of feelings and hurt, but it works in both directions, or all directions. So their super happiness or their hard pain, I don't pick that up at an individual level, but I certainly feel the communal level. So I was really tired, honestly. I needed to rest a lot at the beginning of this, because it was learning how to navigate through this kind of thick sea of fear. People are very afraid. People they're terrified. And our brain then hijacks us into fight, flight, freeze mode, because we think, based on what we've heard, we think that everything outside of us is going to kill us. Everything is a threat. And so we're just creating hard angles in connection with one another. I noticed in the grocery store, people are less friendly. People turn away. If we have to pass each other, like it's kind of with our backs to one another. Again, that same thing where our brain kind of hijacked everything and said, everything outside is a threat, be aware. Brain, I need you to calm down. And that's not also making light of the people who have lost their lives and the communities and the individuals who have been impacted by this. And that's not the whole story, right? That's only one piece of the story. There's a much larger story that is unfolding. And so feeling tired, feeling the grief, I think I would love to facilitate grief circles coming out of this, in addition to a celebration. So maybe in my head, cities might sponsor this in an open space where there's a grief room at the entrance. And so you can come in or out. You can go to the party first, and then when you're weeping, you can come to the grief room, or vice versa. To just have that on hand. Grief is so important. And I think that grief, I think you got that just right. I think that the grief aspect is so overlooked, because when we're grieving at an individual level, we feel like there's a time period on it, and that's not how grief works. We feel like, okay, well, it's been a month, I should be over it. No, grief is very cyclical, and sometimes opening it up. So what has been really important for me is to feel my feelings. When I'm feeling grief, to sit in my grief for a moment. That's not always practical when you're out in the world, when you're, if you're doing something and the grief sort of overtakes you. Can you say, grief, I see you, I hear you, I need to finish this thing right now. In an hour, we can go and grieve and let that run through. And so sometimes that's crying. Sometimes that's breathing. I've worked a lot with, I believe in things being practical. So I work a lot with how can we make this idea, how can we distill it down into something that's practical for right here, right now? And I'll talk about a few of those a little bit later in this program. But really feeling the grief, feeling the heaviness, feeling the fear, is what I've been experiencing. And for me personally, trying to mitigate that so it's not overtaking me. Without having done much in the day, I'm exhausted at night because that emotional toll has been really heavy. Connecting with people too, making it a point to connect with people in the ways that we can. And both and is a very useful paradigm because it allows for two or more seemingly paradoxical things to coexist. So I might be grieving and fatigued at connecting. I might be I know this is a Zoom call, but just they have Zoom fatigue. That's a very real thing. They're like, I have to.
Zoom is like active, right?
Yes, I have to bring you into my home when I really only saw you at work. And now, and there's things with that, but have to do that on a daily or weekly basis. That's a lot for people who haven't done it before.
It's true. Very true. Good. All good points.
So, there's a lot happening at the individual and the collective level, and just kind of sitting in it. It's okay that this is happening. It's okay that we feel what we feel, and to sit in that in a meaningful way.
And it is absolutely, I can connect with you. It's a lot to process. And I think in my first 2 weeks, for me, being a parent and staying home for work and working, I think I just had to process it all. And so I was a little like sluggish in the beginning too. I was writing music, overplaying songs and putting my words to it and just trying to stay like lifted. And I was like, 2 weeks, we can do this. And then, it continues. But I think that I process a lot and I find my mind thinking about a lot of different things. So yes, as we're experiencing this place, for me, I am very tired, but yeah, the sleep is a little bit interrupted as well from all this. So it definitely has been a lot to think about. What has been the hardest thing for you?
For the first time in my life, I live about an hour from my grandmother. So I've not been able to see her in 2 months where I visited regularly. She's fine. I call, but it's not the same. I've been a traveler notoriously throughout my adult life, and my family's not from Philly. So like most family, so here's the thing about Philly. Most people who are like, there's value in born and raised. I moved there when I was 3, and to you, I'm still probably not a Philadelphian.
3 or more, that's great. I mean, you were
yes, except I'm the youngest.
Oh,
right. If it was just me, I would get a pass. But it's not just me. So I'm the youngest, and my family's not from there. Whereas, so most people from Philly, their grandmom, aunties, cousins live relatively close by, often walkable, kind of all in the same neighborhood, same block sometimes. And if not that, maybe across town because somebody moved across town. But so that's not my story. Neither of my parents are from Philadelphia. So for the first time in my adult life, after having lived in a lot of places, I'm close to my grandmother. I'm and just lost the other grandmother a year ago. So feeling it even more, kind of just that maternal grandmother energy. So I miss going to see my grandmother in person. It's been very wonderful to visit with her.
So where do you live currently?
I live in Raleigh-Durham area, North Carolina.
Very cool. I lived in Durham for 2 years and it was fun. And the school district was great. I was just, venturing to the South I was a single parent of 1 at the time, and I wanted to try the cost of living. Unfortunately, the school districts didn't pay very well. And
right.
A once a month paycheck, and I was like, whoa, I like to shop way too much for this. between that and this, the union and, healthcare and all those things, I just had to come back to reality up north. And so, yeah, but I had an amazing time connecting with a lot of people in North Carolina. It was really fun. So, interesting. What are some of the positive, and I know you're doing a lot of positive things that you are doing that maybe could maybe benefit others, but start with kind of like what you're doing for your own self and self-care, but then what are some other things that people can do to kind of get positive in this time or stay positive?
Unplugging works for me now. So that's a generational thing. Me saying unplugging to you makes some amount of sense because we grew up in a time where technology wasn't an appendage for us. One of the things I learned from my dissertation work, where my dissertation, I asked teenage girls, Black teenage girls, and their mothers how the girls feel about themselves. So one of the right, that's a whole other conversation, or 15 conversations. One of the things that the girls taught me was that the relationship with technology was so much more than I had understood it. It really is an appendage. Like, I might think of my arm, they think of their phone and their social media channels as an extension of their identities.
Yes.
So me saying to a teenager or a young adult, just unplug, that feels like an identity crisis. That feels like you're asking me to turn off a part of my identity. So instead of maybe unplugging completely, like I might do, maybe you take a siesta. A siesta in many parts of the world, not in the United States. I'm hoping one of the positive things I'm hoping we may get out of this is the need for siestas. But a siesta is a time of break in the middle of the day, usually, where everybody's not working, everybody's not in school. It's just a couple of hours. Often it might be lunchtime, and then people kind of have the ability to take a nap or to just be down, to be restful for a little bit of time. So that I might encourage you to do that. And if you can, see if you can turn your phone off. If you could just turn it off for like an hour, and maybe not all the way off, maybe you turn it on silent and put it across the room and turn it over. I find that when my phone is face up, I'm much more inclined to be paying attention to it. And if I put it on silent and and face it down, in some ways, I can forget about it for at least a little while.
I love it. Siesta. You heard it here. Let's do it. All
yes.
If you listening, siestas.
Yes, I'm hoping that we'll get siestas out of this.
Okay, I'm going to tweet that one.
Come on now. So that's one of the things. Also, as I said before, really taking time to reflect on what you've learned. What you've learned and who do you want to be going in. When I moved to California for grad school, my sister said, no one knows you in California. You can be whoever you want to be. And I was like, that's really good advice. So here, I would encourage all of us to come out of this intentionally, come out on purpose. If you had momentum building with the things you were doing before we all got kind of collectively sent to our rooms, and those are the things you want to keep doing, go for it. If, like many of us, you're like, oh, what's very clear to me with a little bit of distance is all the things that weren't working. How can we make one of those better? How can we come out doing just one? Because sometimes our tendency is there's 15 things that were wrong, and now I got to fix all 15 of them. That's not sustainable. And we start with one step on one thing coming out that we'd like to do differently, but intentionally differently. You can do this on purpose. You can say, I'm going to show up in this different way on purpose. You can say, I'm going to try this new thing. And one of the things you may have learned as a parent and still working is that you're very grateful to have an office to go into. That's okay too. There doesn't have to be guilt about whatever you're feeling, whatever you feel like you've learned about yourself, about your surroundings, about your job, about your government. Learning is, a very opportune thing in this moment. And you can be intentional. You can be on purpose in going back out into the world in maybe just one way that is different from before. If we go back to the way we were before, we're probably going to recreate this. We have a really great opportunity to create something new that works much better for all of us rather than a select few.
I totally agree. I think I have seen a lot of reflection in people and a lot of like openness and sharing. I have been personally living by the gratitude moments and having the gratitude be greater than the expectation. So I feel like that, reduces some of the anxiety that I might be experiencing or stress based on, just, not focusing on the positive or the gratitude, things that I'm grateful for. And the self-care has been another one that, but definitely the chunking of what you said, any kind of goal setting that someone would be doing, baby steps. Like I liken it to my dissertation writing and how my advisor was just like, you are just thinking too macro and you're not making any progress. So I'm gonna need you to micro, slow it down, take it one step at a time, and you will get through this. It has changed my whole writing world. I mean, 2 hours a night, consistently, different things each night. It's the pacing. So that pacing of yourself. I love it. Thank you. All right. And so final question is, what advice do you have to parents and what advice do you have to students based on your background and experiences? What can you share as words of wisdom?
Well, words and actions of wisdom. So words for parents, it's okay to relax your expectation. If you are working and at home with your children and you're expected to be their primary caretaker, you're probably not going to get nearly as much work done. So just being easy with yourself, relaxing the idea that the 50 things that you normally get done in an office day at the office, it might be 20. It might be like 5. So really understanding that this time is different for a reason. Like allow for the difference, allow for the alternative schedule, whatever that means for you. My sister, she's a parent of small ones, and at first, learning time started at like 8:30. Now it's like 10, 11.
I can connect to your sister. Tell her that's great.
Yes. She also, only one is school age and the other 2 are daycare. So the daycare ones, their packet might take like 10 minutes. So, and even the school age one, maybe an hour, and that's an hour with all the interruptions. Like it's really like a half hour of work a day. So that doesn't have to be at 8:30. If you have smaller children, understanding that you probably have kind of the morning time to get whatever academic work done, and it's probably not going to happen after lunch. Once you hit lunchtime, it's change modes. It's okay to be flexible in your scheduling, and I would say that's for everyone. Also for youth and young people who may be listening to this, first of all, it gets better. Like this is a hard time for you to be living through. And it doesn't have to be, we don't have to be on superstar level right now. Breaking things down into manageable parts is the best thing you can do for yourself. If you can look at a goal, a big goal, and just say, what is the very next step? What do I need? What one step can I take right now? If you did that for a whole year, you would have taken 365 steps toward a new goal. First of all, most goals don't have nearly that amount of steps, that number of steps. So 365 steps in a new direction is a long way when we're talking goal setting and kind of life setting. And then for everyone, here's a couple of techniques that will help you when you're freaking out. Okay. So remember how I talked about at the beginning, your stomach, digestion with your stomach. So we have these channels of energy in our body. They're called meridians. And so one of them is the stomach meridian. What does it do? It helps you digest things. So I'm going to take my glasses off for this because it's a little bit easier to see. So I want you to take your fingertips, place them on your cheekbones, with a little bit of pressure. Don't hurt yourself, but you want to feel it. And we're going to take 3 deep breaths all the way into our belly with our fingertips on our cheekbones. Ready? Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. If you can hold it for a moment, breathe out. One more time, breathe in and breathe out. So, Dr. Beck, how do you feel? Like, was there a change for you?
Yeah, I mean, I always, when I'm conscious of my breathing, I feel a little bit more relaxed.
Mm-hmm. So you can take 3 deep breaths without doing the fingertips on the cheekbones. That enhances it because what your cheekbones are the end of your stomach meridian. So this helps you digest things a little bit better. Breathing also helps you digest things a little bit better as well. And then one more, when you're super freaking out about everything all around you, I should have left my glasses off. You're going to start with your fingertips on your temples.
Okay.
And then with some pressure, I want you to push around your ears and off your shoulders. We're going to do that 3 times too. So bring it down, around, and off your shoulders. Second time, around the back of your ear, off your shoulders. And then the third time, instead of off your shoulders, I want you to come rest at your heart center. So start with your fingers on your temples, come down, around, and sit at your heart center. Oh, I'm a lot calmer just in doing that.
I think that helps with, like, it felt like, massage. I read something that I was taking professional learning wise about self-culture, talking about how much is important the touch or is. And so that, it's both. That's very important.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those.
We're in a touch deprived kind of era right this moment. So
yes. Well, thank you. Can you please share? I appreciate your insights, your experiences, your affirmations of things that I think that we need to continue doing and take things slow. I really appreciate it. I know that people have benefited from hearing from you today. Where can people find you? I know, is your Facebook an open thing in terms of the mindful moments? Is there a website that you can follow? Can you please share that information with the audience?
Yes. So you can find me on my website, Dr. Charlie Brown. I spell my name Charlie with just an I and Brown like the color. So drcharliebrown.com. You can take a look at all that I'm doing there. And you can find me on both Facebook and Instagram at Dr. Charlie Brown.
Hey, I don't think I followed you on Instagram yet, so I will do that as well. Well, thank you, Dr. Charlie Brown, from this aspiring doctor.
Yes, I'm affirming that.
Thank you. And a lot of people in my life have done the same thing. I appreciate all the positive energy. Keep them coming my way. As you see things that relate to this topic, please send them my way. And as you do things, send it my way so I can continue to celebrate and promote you as a legacy leader. Thank you for your mindset and all that you're doing in the community to help others. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, future Dr. Beck. I'm owning it. I'm claiming it. We will celebrate when that day arrives.
Thank you. All right. We're signing off. Thank you. Please follow us on YouTube, Jeneen C.A.R.E.S. This episode will air, and I hope that you will subscribe and benefit from her. Take advantage of her knowledge and her expertise. I really appreciate it. And have a